Good morning, everybody. I would like to introduce briefly our two speakers today. You know that today's session is on very practical thing, that is disaster, happening every day, almost every day in anywhere in the world. So I'm sure you'll love to talk about it. You have so many experiences to share. You have questions that you want to get answered, and we have two speakers. One is from an academician background, and another one is from completely a practitioner background. So that is a good mix, and I'm sure they will be able to give us their experiences, their stories, and also their analysis from the experiences. First of all, I want to introduce Anshu Gupta. He recently received the Ramon Magsaysay Award last year. People tell him, or people identify him as clothing man. So he will tell why he has got that name. He was a freelance journalist, and he also worked with the corporate sector 17, 18 years ago. Now he's leading the Gunj team. So I'll give you the mic to briefly talk about yourself. And then Khandokar Hasibul Kabir, who is an academician because he teaches in BRAC University. He is an architect, and but when I was talking with him, I learned that he wants to be identified as a community architect. So I don't know what that meaning is also. He will briefly talk about it. He has done a fantastic job in Bangladesh, Nepal, and Haiti after Haiti earthquake, Nepal earthquake, and Sidr cyclone in Bangladesh. And we want to know from him as well what he has done and how he has done those things, what was his experiences. So first to Anshu, talk briefly about your work and your experiences.
Sure. Okay. Morning, everyone. So I think it's a bit strange that for the last few years we have been talking about disasters, and we are called to work in, talk about disasters, because, you know, when 17, 18 years back, 1998, we started, our basic thought or premises was that why do we need a disaster to work for people? Because half the world does not need a disaster. Because at the end of the day, poverty is the biggest disaster. That's how we used to think, and we still think. So we started basically working on a few non-issues, as I call in my sessions. When we talk about non-issues, and in the next 1 hour, maybe we'll touch upon a lot on such things directly, indirectly. These are the non-issues where we don't talk often, which is something which people like us, who are the decision makers or who are the practitioners, have actually taken it for granted. Like, I'll just give you one example. I mean, you spoke about the clothing issue and all. So years back, we said that you talk about 3 basic needs of humankind, which is roti, kapda, or makan, food, cloth, and shelter. And then we realized that you remember clothing only when you want to do some so-called charity, or when a disaster happens. So one of the basic needs of all of us has actually become a disaster relief material. So you need a flood to be flooded with clothes. Simple. If you talk about Millennium Development Goals, Sustainability Goal, all kind of planning commissions, planning schemes, budgets across the globe, you have some 150 issues from domestic violence to global warming. You will never find clothing written as a subject. Also, it's such a huge need. So we argued that why do you send so much of clothing at the time of disasters? Because the fact remains that disaster hit people actually do not need enough, much clothes, because clothing is something which you can only wear one at a time. The second pair of cloth you have to store. First thing which a disaster takes away from you is your storage capacity. So that's why even the second pair of cloth becomes a burden on the person who is affected by the disaster. We argued that if earthquake is a disaster, flood is a disaster, how come winters are not a disaster? Why don't we have figures of people who die or suffer due to lack of clothing in winters? It's a highly preventable disaster. And one incident, which happened, almost 25 years back in my journalism days, When I met this person in Delhi, and this was just one of the incidents, not many other incidents, not as gruesome as this one, but yes. So met this person called Habib. His full-time job was to pick up unclaimed dead bodies for the local police, because city of Delhi, like any other big city, has a huge amount of homeless people. And before they settle down in the slums or get some job and all, they go through a very miserable life. It's almost estimated to about 100,000 people on the roads, on the pavements, footpaths, and all that kind of thing. Now, a lot of people die due to various reasons, rise from hunger, medicine, lack of medicine, attention, whatever. Police would pay 20 rupees and 2 meters of white cloth per person. Habib Bhai with his blind wife Amna Begum would go pick up the dead body, bring it to the system or for the cremation and all that kind of thing. So when I saw this, I mean, I spent about a week with him. Early morning on the footpath, I used to go, spend the entire day, used to cover all these operations. And the operations was to pick up the bodies. Morning 6 to 8, it used to be a lot because a lot of people die in the nights because of various reasons. Two statements came up. Habib Bhai actually said that in winters his work goes up. Many times he has so much of work that he cannot handle it. And to my utter surprise, every 24 hours in the range of 5-6 kilometers where he was able to take his rickshaw, Habib Bhai used to pick up 10 to 12 dead bodies. Summers, the average used to be 4 to 5. He had a little daughter called Bano, who gave the most shocking statement. Obviously, she said in Hindi, let me translate it. She said that, in Hindi she said कि जब मुझे ठंड लगती है तो मैं लाश के साथ चिपक कर सो जाती हूँ. When I feel cold, I hug the dead body and sleep. It does not trouble me, it does not turn around. So a few kilometers away from people like us in the middle of the fast-growing country's capital, a child is forced to sleep with a dead body because we, the development sector, the government, the opinion leader, the policymakers, never understood that winters are an annual disaster. Kept talking about clothing as a basic need, but never took that in the list of development subjects. And that's just one. Next thing, just related to clothing, another disaster let me talk about. So we started working on cloth and many other second-hand material. I'll share about it later in the conversation. So 5-6 years later, we touched upon another issue. We said that every single woman across the globe needs a piece of cloth, which is now called sanitary pad. In the nations where you do not have enough to wear, where you need cotton and you get synthetic, from where this lady is bringing that piece of cloth. And can you imagine that if 10 years back, if you go on Google and you type sanitary pad, sanitary napkin, we actually didn't have even a single major work in India, no problem statement, no solution. We were pretty shocked because we thought that not only India, this entire region is known for self-help group, microfinance, kids center and all, and everywhere the target is women. We started traveling across the country, and Bangladesh's stories are gruesome, which we have. It's not about India only, India, Nepal, Pakistan, all these countries. They use the dirtiest piece of cloth because for them it's a synonym of dirt. They wash it, they cannot dry it in sunlight because the kind of clusters people are living. Washing itself is a big problem because now the life depends on public taps. Public taps in the name of public convenience are always put up at a public place. So there is no privacy even to take a bath. How do you wash that piece of cloth? So with dirt, moisture, they wear it again. Then we found that you have 2 to 3 women in the family, their cycles are different, they are sharing the same piece of cloth. We further found that not only within the family, it is actually the property of a village. So many women get together, use it. Millions is a very small word in this part of the world. So crores and crores of women and girls are actually using sand, ash, jute bags, rice husk, dry grass, dry leaf, used sanitary pad, newspapers to cow dung. I mean, anything and everything which can stop and absorb is being used as a sanitary pad. We have cases where a lady used a piece of blouse which had a hook, she died of tetanus. We found a case where a centipede entered and the lady died. Today, the biggest health racket in this part of the world is removing the uterus by the quacks or the corrupt health system. One of the basic reasons is basically this lack of this piece of cloth, because the moment an infection happens, you are told that you have cervical cancer or the cancer is cancer will set in. And exactly at the childbearing age, your uterus is removed. So my point in this morning after the breakfast is that we can sit here for 2 days, 3 days, discuss whole lot of strategies and approaches, but the fact remains that most of us are not even going deeper and understanding the non-issues which are troubling the countries like ours. Because we are exactly at a totally different stage even now. Let's accept that, honestly, whether it is India or Pakistan or Bangladesh or so many other countries. I mean, so many people call us development organization, and I always object. I say, why do you call us development organization? Development happens, from 0 to 10. We deal with the population, a large number of, people who are in the minus level. 0 is maybe 2 meals, just dal chawal, basic 2 meals a day, or some primary education, a pair of cloth. Our population is largely in the minus level, so minus to 0 is development or survival. So we'll touch upon many other issues in how we are operating and all. I mean, that's most important, because most important part for all of us is that if we really want progress, we need to move out of charity syndrome. And that's the biggest thing which happens at the time of disaster, without understanding that mostly the disaster-hit people are not only the poorest people. All of us can become victim of disaster, because now disasters are not limited to a particular geography. You cannot say that in my country the flood only happens in north or east or south.
Okay. Thank you, Anshu, and thank you for introducing. And yes, this is, I think, a really good mix. And Anshu talked about one of the basic needs. I will be talking about another basic need, which is shelter. I mean, this is like an extended, like this clothing, then extended clothing is shelter. And as I call myself community architect, is why? Because most of the time when I call architect, generally most of the architect can reach only maybe less than 10% of the population. But what about the other 90%? So that's why we deliberately call ourselves as community architect. And a new breed of architects are coming up today from the academia and from the practice. Those who are calling themselves community architects. And professionally, they may not be trained as architect. They are engineers, they are lawyers, but they are calling themselves architects. So that's the thing. I work with BRAC, and after the cyclone, Cedar, BRAC wanted to help people building their houses in the southern part of Bangladesh in 2007. So then when they came to BRAC University, and as we always connect this with development, shelter, then development. It's architects, engineers can build the houses, safer, stronger houses. The technology is there, but technologies are not in the field. So what we care is how to, maybe BRAC can build 1,000 or 5,000 buildings, but people need thousands of houses. So how we can help all? So the main objective of our work is to build the community first, make the people stronger first, and then the people can build their community in that way. So from the very beginning, training, workshops, even after disaster, people are stressed. So they need a lot of things, and they don't have houses. They're living in other places on embankment. Then how we can go to them and how we can discuss about this, how we can share this knowledge. So this is the process. So the way we work, we don't take any product. We don't go with any preconceived idea. we just go there, and this is what we can do, this is the knowledge we have, then we learn from them, then we bring them, because most of the time, when we are in the field, and the people in the field, they are engaged with so many things, so we cannot concentrate. So sometimes we bring people out of their context. Most of the time, after the cyclone Cedar, what we did, we quick reconnaissance, maybe 10 days visit with all the professionals to know their context, what are the resources they have, then bring them to the university. 5-6 days workshop in the university. The builders, the masons, carpenters, and we also invite the poets, then singers, then artists from the locality. Then why we invite them? Because they are the keepers people to disseminate it in their own language. When architects and engineers say, "Oh, this is too boring," but when they disseminate it in their language, then it goes very quickly. Like proverbs. In Bangladesh, there are a lot of proverbs like we call Khonar Bachan, and when we learn, share in those workshops, then they disseminate in through those proverbs. So this is the process, and in the end, from the beginning, we think that the litmus test, the test is like that. In the end, if people say that, yeah, BRAC or BRAC University build our community, then we feel that it's our failure. In the end, when they say that we build our own community, then we found that we are really happy. So that's our goal. That's what we are trying to do in Bangladesh. The same process, we took it to Haiti. We trained around 150 community people, and they built 300 houses. Same budget, but 300 houses were 300 types, different 300 types of different houses. One architect, one engineer, but 300 houses. How come? So it's the system. And all are satisfied because they build it by themselves. Only thing we say that we are doctors, physicians of houses. We are doctors of houses. So you need to follow this prescription, otherwise your house will be unhealthy. So that we just give those prescriptions depending on the locality. Like in Haiti, in the mountain, one prescription near the valley, one prescription near the another one. So the houses are becoming different, but only thing is to care is that all houses needs to be strong, safe. And in the same process, we are working in Nepal. Now we are in that in the beginning of that process of training, and all the training happen through action, and this action also build trust with people. So trust, action, and building community. These are the things, and we completely rely on people. Maybe in the beginning, no, it will not happen, but there is no other option. We felt throughout this, over the years, that without trusting on the local people's ability, is not possible. So this is the way we work.
Anshu uttered an important word, that is two things he has said: preventing disaster, and then hitting the root causes of disaster. I think that's where we can concentrate our discussion today. And briefly, I would like to add with Anshu and Kabir that Anshu and their organizations are actually using those materials collected from different sources like clothes and even the piece of tables, chairs, and others, to use it as a cash materials, like when communities are working together with them, they will not receive cash money, but they are receiving those materials so that they also feel dignified. And it's not a charity. It's becoming a more a dignified process that community is working for their own recovery after the disaster, but also getting support from not getting support, but earning what they are working for. So that's a purely a dignified process, and we always advocate for that. And what Kabir is saying also reflects critical things, like we always talk about involving community, we always talk about what kind of housing a family will need. So many houses we built without a proper windows, without proper doors, without a veranda, and children cannot play after that construction, and women cannot do their maintain their privacy, or elderly people cannot access those houses, or educational institutions, or toilets. And as a result, as an organization, we always feel that, okay, we have done our job, we have done so many houses, toilets, and schools, and hospitals. And every evaluation, if you go through, we will bring out these critical points again and again and again. So I think I would like to first start some questioning to these two experienced people, and then open the floor, and to make it more interactive, whatever you want to ask, what kind of questions you want to ask, you can prepare yourself. I don't want to bring so many questions to them, so that we want to hear from you and hear from them together. So Anshu and Kabir, you are talking about good things, but we also want to learn the critical challenges you have faced or you have experienced. Internally, external challenges, internal challenges. So can you briefly, because yes, time is a bit limited, so if you briefly talk about your experience of any recent disasters. You already said what you have done, but based on any recent disasters, what you have done, and what were the challenges, gaps, and what could have been done in a better way. If you reflect on these points quickly, and then we will open the floor.
So I think, I saw first disaster in my life in 1991 when I was still a student. There was a massive earthquake in Uttarkashi, in one of the hilly terrain of India. And after 25 years now, as a student and as so-called a development practitioner or relief worker, whatever you want to name, I think unfortunately what I see is that the scale is really grown like anything, but approaches are still same. So you still think that, old material is the biggest disaster relief material. We all still think that relief phase should be over in 10 days, 15 days, and after that the rehabilitation should happen. And then you actually see that after 15 days all the community kitchens are over, and people don't even have access to food, and suddenly all these big agencies will come and claim that now let's rehabilitate. So I always question, I said that once you don't start earning again, how do you say that let's start rehabilitation? Nepal was our first venture outside India, and that's where I saw that whole lot of agencies unwanted. If you talk about the rescue missions, you know that there are no more people, and it's not like one of those NDRF and any other relief agency or rescue agency which says that we will even recover dead bodies. So all these big organizations came from all across the globe because Nepal has free access to people, and they don't stop many people when people come from outside. And ultimately we are eating up the resources of the local country. There is no place to even stay. There is no one to save now. So I think that's something which we are challenging, that we need to change our approaches in the entire game. We need to be prepared much more. We need to learn. One of the critical examples that we are not learning is the recent Chennai floods. Just in the month of November, December, in the hardcore cities. And say about 10 years back, we had the similar flood in Mumbai. So these two metros, mega metros of India, if we would have learned anything from Mumbai floods in the last decade, Chennai wouldn't have happened. That's a clear-cut proof that as a nation, as people, across the globe, not only about India, we're actually not learning. We are just sitting on the water catchment areas. So basically all the low-lying areas across the globe are now having the high-rise buildings. Just see in any part of Bangladesh also. I have not visited, this is my first visit to Bangladesh, but I can guarantee you, because this is how the entire world is operating. So if you eat up the entire space of holding water, the flood in any case will trouble. It's a very simple thing. The other learning which all of us need to have is, as I touched upon, is that disaster is not now limited to a specific area, geography, community. Nepal is one of the biggest example. Chennai flood is the biggest example, and we had much bigger example last year. If you just Google, and you must have heard the Kashmir floods in the valley of Kashmir, where you even had the king, the rulers about 100 years back even made a proper flood channel. That if you have more water in Jhelum, the excess water will flow through flood channel. Now the flood channel has houses, flood channel has offices, flood channel has hotels. So the entire water actually entered in the city, and we didn't know how to take it out. If in a valley, if you just say that 3 feet of water, the fact remains that the bottom of the water is about 23 feet. Because the valley is like this. And the water was there for over a month. I think that's what we all need to understand, that it is something which can now happen anywhere. Whether it is flood, cyclone, and all that, it is not limited to the geography, so we need to be prepared accordingly. We also need to dignify the entire act of giving. Let us not start talking about Complan and a whole lot of fancy products which we have in excess because a corporate wants to give. And that goes to the areas where it is not needed at all. When there is a series of material which is becoming such a big burden on people like us who work on the ground, then how do you tackle with that? I mean, overnight you can't say that if you wear a dhoti you will start wearing a suit. It's a very personal thing. Just because I have more of suits, I will give more of suits to people. It should not operate like that. So let's make, I don't know if Bangladesh works like that. In India, we are still learning, and we need to really work more. We need to make disaster a part of our life and a routine work. Because now it is happening too frequently. 2013 onwards, especially when we had massive flood and where we lost thousands of people in the hilly terrains of India called Uttarakhand. After that, there is no stop in terms of disaster. And every single disaster is becoming much bigger than the previous disaster.
Yeah, most of the time, the shelter activities come after disaster. But it's very important to work with these things, in the normal time, so that people are prepared to, for the disaster. And the main what you have asked, the main challenges, or maybe the weaknesses we face, is we use or we think that we need to do this, like, we need to go through a participatory process. But most of the time it's kind of bookish thing. But if we just take it like in a common sense, like how we solve our problem in a family. We fight. It's not a, normal happy thing. We fight. Then we make compromises. Then we do. So these all the things are I think need to consider during the process. And all the things I have mentioned is small, but when we want to make it or scale it up, I think the scaling up of what we are also discussing. Scaling up is the main challenge, because maybe I am feeling one thing, but when I am giving the responsibility to another person, that person needs to take it in the similar way. Otherwise, it will not be benefited. These are I think the challenge is how to disseminate these small success stories in a bigger scale. Yeah.
Thank you, Kabir and Anshup. I want to open the floor. Before that, just reflecting on their points, that disasters are teaching a lot of things about development. We are building dams in one side, we are creating erosion in other side. We are building dams over rivers, we are creating dead rivers in the lower riparians. So we are building, like, for example, a classic example is Nepal. It was predicted that Kathmandu will have a big earthquake very soon. Just 80 years ago, there was a big earthquake in 1934, and it's 2015. And it was predicted that the destruction would be massive in the old houses. But when I reached Kathmandu after 10 days of the earthquake, I was really, really surprised. Because my thought in my mind was that I will see completely devastated Kathmandu and completely devastated the old areas, the beautiful areas from the ancient periods are fully gone. What I have seen and what I have experienced is that most of the new buildings, the skyscraper, their skyscraper is 15, 16 floor or a little bit over. 70% of those new buildings has been damaged rather than the old buildings. So, but people haven't thought about it and haven't given good time to analyze why it has happened. Still, we are talking that Dhaka city, old Dhaka city will be collapsed more, and the other buildings will collapse less. And the same paradigm, same kind of discourses we are talking about, but we are not learning, and we are not using that learning in the development works. So just for your, to provoke you to ask question, and now to the floor. Okay. Already good number. We will take 3-4 questions together. Okay, and then we'll try to reflect. First hand was here.
Thank you. My name is Tanzila Mujumdar Drishti. I work for BRAC Urban Development Program. My question is specifically directed to Anshu. Thank you so much for that interesting definition of disaster itself. Disaster is definitely more than what we realize about it. My question was, there is this reality that actually a lot of organizations are taking the charity approach when they actually work on field. So that, to a large extent, is actually shaping the behavior of the beneficiaries. So when some other organization, which is actually aiming at development and empowerment, they go and start working with the same population, they receive a lot of resistance from that population, because that population is more used to getting things for free. So they don't really want to work for their own empowerment. Therefore, there's this big clash between charity culture and empowerment or development culture. So how do you think that this industry or this sector should actually address that in the long run?
Hi, I'm Isabel. I work at BRAC too. So I don't think it's that we think clothes are so important in a natural disaster, but it's what we have in excess of. So that's the resource that we can mobilize quickly. Whereas few people feel like they have an excess of money that they're happy to give away, or fewer people. So how can we think about, how can we use our excesses to address natural disasters more effectively?
Hello, I'm Madan Pariyar from Nepal, actually, ID Nepal. Thank you, Ansu, for presenting a very pathetic scenario of the consequences which humanities are suffering from. because of the disasters which could have been prevented. But I would like to, and the importance of clothing that you have highlighted in the presentation. I would like to go a little further, like say, the experiences in Nepal that you're just all reflecting upon. After the earthquake, there was so much of emphasis on, food and shelter. But I didn't see, in fact, I didn't notice so much on clothing. There were a little bit of blankets and some minor type of things, provided as relief measures. But there are not so much of, emphasis on clothing for them. And people have really suffered a lot out of that. Now, my question to you is, what do you think, how these dimensions can get into the disaster relief measures, what could be our vision? How could we go ahead and see that this, as a very important element, could be incorporated in all our activities which are related with, disaster relief or rehabilitation and all that? Thank you very much.
So let me start with Nepal. Okay, I think the Nepal story is a clear-cut indication that how the policymakers or the people who think they know everything stop or decide. I mean, if you'll agree with me that Nepal has something called anti-dumping policy, where the old material cannot enter in the country. So when we reached there and when we started arguing with the senior most people, we said that fine, there is no need of bringing material from other part of the world, but do we have a policy where at least the Nepali people can really contribute a lot, and do we have a system in that? And the fact remains the scale of the disaster was so huge, so widespread, that it was very, very tough for the local resources to tackle the problem. It is a clear-cut example that without understanding that the homeless people who have lost their shelters, in the next 1 or 2 months, massive rains will happen, followed by the extreme winters. For people like us who work hardcore on the clothing issue, much bigger than the earthquake, we were worried about the rainy season and the winters, because you can tackle rains and snowfall if you're there in a house, inside a house to some extent. But in that case, it was not there. So it was actually very ironical, very sad, the way things operated there. It was very easy to give permission to some of the organizations who have time-tested models in working with cloth. Because, ultimately, I personally feel that clothing is, the providing clothes to disaster-hit people many times become a much bigger disaster than the original disaster. Because it comes in all kind of shape, size, everything. And people don't even bother. I mean, this is what in India I always argue, that if our famous actor Shah Rukh Khan stays next to the sea, you say he stays in seaside Bangalore. But when the tsunami happened, the entire world was sending even old used undergarments to people. Although even those people were staying, those people also had the seaside Bangalows who were affected by the tsunami. That's the dignity part of people. So cloth that way is a much, much bigger disaster if we do not understand the basic need, culture, shape, size, whole lot of things. It's a very personal matter. But Nepal was totally a big disaster in terms of clothing. We tried our best because, the best possible way to reach Nepal was by road. And we were working on the border, just about 60 kilometers, 80 kilometers from the border. You have acute need of clothing. People desperately need a piece of cloth, but just because of the border issues and the bureaucracy and the rules and regulations, the relief which is needed is not reaching. All kind of fancy food items are reaching there. You have food items which you can only have with milk, and there is no even water to drink properly. But just because some company wanted to give truckloads of material which are going to expire in the next 3 months. That's why it was reaching there. On your question on the dignity versus charity and all, it's a big challenge. But I think it will happen if you have the conviction. Like, you just touched upon how we are operating. So our model is what? Basically, we collect old material, cloth, utensil, footwear, excess material of retail chain, material coming from offices. Every single thing except a shit pot is acceptable at Gunj. And we deal with almost 3,000 tons of material every year. We process it. When I say process, we actually match the needs of people. That what do people need in Bihar? What do people need in Bengal? Because every single state has different kind of need, different kind of shape, size, the way they live. So we actually personalize that in terms of geography. It goes to the villages, largely in the slums. They choose their own issues. So they will make a road, they will clean a pond, they will dig a well. Recently, we cleaned about 100,000 square meter of Dal Lake in Kashmir. Many mangroves, huge mangroves have come up in the Sundarbans area where people really planted that and these mangroves. Just go on the website and Facebook of Goonj, you'll find all these stories, some of these stories. So people choose their own issues, work on that, and then instead of money, they are rewarded with this particular material, cloth, utensil, footwear, all kind of material. Same approach we take in the time of disaster. So the first few days, 7-10 days, when the acute need of ration is there or medicine is there, that goes as it is, like the relief material, because that's the need. The second phase, just in the next 10-12 days, people start cleaning their own localities, repairing their own roads and all, because the government will come later, the machineries will come later, but it needs to be usable. And then instead of money and all that, the relief material is given as reward to people. Challenge for sure, because parallel there are 100 organizations which are distributing everything free of cost. And all kind of material, we are still dealing 50% material of our material, even in the relief material, is old, because that's the cloth and other things. And there are so many organizations which are bringing absolutely brand new material and giving it free of cost. But one thing which we all need to understand, if you talk about the village people, largely village people only end up in the slums. People like me and you will never go and stay in the slum. The biggest asset of this huge community of this part of the world is something called self-respect, is something called dignity. You do not find beggars in the villages. Begging is a city phenomena. It's our thought process that we treat them as beggars. The day you say that there are two ways of getting it, one, I give you a shirt, I will come tomorrow and say, you are wearing my shirt, do you really want it? I can guarantee 99% people will say no. Then you say there is a proposal, or there is something which is not meant for Goonj or for any other organization which is working together. You choose your own issue, you choose your own problem. This is what we have done in the larger part of the world. People have made this, people have done this. So you choose one of that or any other new issue. You work on that, then earn this material. Tomorrow I come and I say that this shirt belongs to me. You can actually kick me out and say that it might be yours, but I have earned it. That's the self-respect and dignity part. India, which is known for a whole lot of free distribution like any other country because of the political issues and whole lot of issues, in 21 states, we deal with about 3,000 tons of material, and we do not distribute it free of cost. That shows that people are ready to accept the material with lot of dignity. It's just that we need to maybe work on that a bit more.
Kabir, self-respect, and if you reflect on that.
I think I would like to reflect on this dignity issue, how in housing and shelter. Like most of the, just after disaster, what happens, many fund, come. And most of the time it's like given, you give it to them and build houses for them. And we know that, and from the past experience, we know that whatever you give to people or whatever you give me, I will always complain. And inside, I will not feel good because of that dignity part, because I didn't earn it, and I cannot say that it's mine. So the same thing, is coming from outside, but we make it, through the process, we make it that is theirs. They are earning it. The way, Goonj is working. So after the Cyclone Ayla, we build houses which the money came like 120,000 taka came from outside, but the house cost more than 2 lakhs. So this 80,000 taka, where this 80,000 taka, came per house, and it came from the people in terms of labor, in terms of other resources, in terms of, design input, everything. And this, 43 houses and the school, you may have seen the schools in the poster outside, is completely, designed with them. Then, this sense of, ownership is giving them a, sense of dignity. And another important thing, maybe, in development, we put it in the last of our list, that is beauty and aesthetics in development. But, we learned it from the very extreme poor people, the ultra poor people of Bangladesh. BRAC is working with ultra poor people, TUP program. And we did research with them about the outdoor space use pattern and how they design it. And when they have the freedom to design, and this aesthetic aspect, this beauty aspect come in surface, when they have the freedom. Otherwise, they don't tell. So when they have this, freedom to design, their own identity, their own aesthetic come, and if we can listen, if we can internalize, then it becomes complex and beautiful. That's what we are trying in Nepal also. Because Nepal, if the houses are destroyed, the places we're working, most of the traditional houses are destroyed because it's built with mud and stone. With a little shake, it falls. Then now the people are prescribing that these are the types of houses because but if we don't consider the cultural aspect, we'll lose that image of Nepal, the houses, the outdoor spaces, the culture. So these things also, these cultural things and beauty aspect, for what we also fight, we kill each other, for beauty, those are the things. And we even pay maybe 1 taka more if we design this bottle in a different way. It doesn't take more money, but I mean that beauty aspect. So those things also bring dignity, and those are really important. We feel from architects and engineers' point of view.